In the frozen heart of Siberia, there exists a place so brutal, so unforgiving, that prisoners call it the Black Eagle. It's a facility where Russia sends its most dangerous criminals, men who have committed acts so horrific that society has deemed them unredeemable. But here's what makes this story absolutely chilling. Russia officially abolished the death penalty in 1996. So why are men still dying in a place that shouldn't even exist? What I'm about to reveal will expose a system operating in the shadows, a place where justice has been replaced by something far more sinister. This is the story of Vladimir Kozlov, a man who survived Russia's most secretive prison, and the shocking truth about what really happens behind those concrete walls. Trust me, you need to hear this before it's too late. Welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, we dive deep into the darkest corners of the prison system, uncovering stories that mainstream media won't touch. Today's video is different. This is perhaps the most disturbing investigation we've ever conducted. Before we begin, I need you to do two things. First, hit that subscribe button because this content took months of research, and you won't want to miss what's coming next. Second, drop a comment right now with the word exposed if you think the world needs to know the truth about these secret facilities. Your engagement helps this story reach more people. Now let me take you back to March 2019, to a courtroom in Moscow, where everything started to unravel. Vladimir Kozlov sat in the defendant's cage, a literal metal cage they use in Russian courts, his hands trembling as the judge read the verdict. At 34 years old, his life was about to change forever. The crime? He was convicted of murdering 3 rival gang members in what prosecutors called an execution-style killing in St. Petersburg. But here's where things get interesting. Vladimir has always maintained his innocence. According to his testimony, he was framed by corrupt police officers working with the very gang he was accused of attacking. He had evidence, phone records, witnesses, even CCTV footage that placed him 200 kilometers away from the crime scene at the time of the murders. None of it mattered. The judge, a stern woman named Svetlana Kuznetsova, delivered the sentence without emotion: life imprisonment in a high-security correctional facility. In Russia, this is essentially a death sentence, just a slower, more painful one. But Vladimir's lawyer, a brave man named Dmitry Sokolov, noticed something strange in the paperwork. The facility Vladimir was being sent to wasn't listed in any official registry. Your Honor, Dmitry stood up, his voice cracking with urgency. The facility mentioned in these documents, IK-17 in the Yamalo-Nenets region. I cannot find any official record of its existence. The judge's face went pale for just a split second, a micro-expression that Dmitry would later describe as pure terror. She composed herself quickly and said something that would haunt everyone in that courtroom. The facility exists. The defendant will be transferred within 48 hours. This court is adjourned. What Vladimir didn't know as they dragged him back to his cell was that he was about to enter a place that makes Guantanamo Bay look like a summer camp. The transport happened in the dead of night. Vladimir was shackled, hooded, and thrown into the back of an unmarked cargo truck with 17 other prisoners. They drove for 6 days straight, 6 days, stopping only to switch drivers and allow prisoners to relieve themselves in buckets. One of the prisoners, a man named Alexei, who was serving time for espionage, whispered to Vladimir during the journey, "Do you know where we're going?" "IK-17, Vladimir replied through cracked lips. Alexei's breathing became rapid, panicked. "No, brother. We're going to Kyornaya Metka, the Black Mark. I've heard stories, men go in, but they never come out." "That's every life sentence facility," Vladimir said, trying to stay rational. "No," Alexei insisted, his voice barely audible over the rumble of the truck. "In normal prisons, prisoners still have contact with the outside world. Letters get out. Lawyers visit. Family members know their loved ones are alive. At the Black Mark, you disappear. Completely." Vladimir would soon learn that Alexei wasn't exaggerating. When the truck finally stopped, they were in the middle of nowhere. And I mean nowhere. Endless tundra stretched in every direction, no trees, no buildings, just frozen wasteland, and a sky so gray it looked like concrete. The temperature was -40 degrees Celsius. In the distance, barely visible through the swirling snow, stood a massive, concrete structure. It looked more like a Soviet-era nuclear facility than a prison, brutalist architecture, razor wire stacked 20 feet high, and watchtowers every 50 meters equipped with searchlights and what appeared to be automated weapon systems. This was IK-17, the Black Eagle, Russia's most secret prison. The intake process was designed to break you psychologically before you even reached your cell. The guards, and I use that term loosely because these men looked more like special forces operators, wore black uniforms with no insignia. No names, no badges, nothing to identify them. Vladimir and the other prisoners were stripped naked in a freezing concrete room and hosed down with water, so cold it felt like needles piercing their skin. Then came the medical examination, which was really just an excuse for guards to assert dominance through humiliation and violence. But the worst part? The silence. Unlike every other prison Vladimir had been in, and he'd been in several during his trial and appeals, there was no shouting, no chaos, no noise. The guards didn't yell. The prisoners didn't speak. Everything happened in this eerie, oppressive quiet that made you feel like you'd been buried alive. After processing, Vladimir was issued a gray uniform with a number stitched on the back. 4427. No name. Just a number. A guard, the first one to speak directly to him, leaned in close and whispered, "Forget your name. Forget your family. Forget the world outside. You are 4427 now, and you will be 4427 until you die." They led him through a maze of corridors, each one identical to the last, concrete walls, fluorescent lights, the smell of disinfectant mixed with something else, something like decay. Finally, they reached cell block D, section 9. The guard opened a heavy steel door, and Vladimir got his first look at what would be his home for the rest of his life. The cell was 3 meters by 2 meters, barely larger than a coffin, stood on end. A concrete bed platform, a metal toilet with no seat, and a tiny slot in the door for food delivery. No window. No natural light. No human contact. "Welcome to IK-17, the guard said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "We call this the Garden of Death. And you, 4427, are one of the flowers." The first week in IK-17 was designed to destroy your sense of time, identity, and hope. Vladimir learned this quickly. The lights in his cell never turned off. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, harsh fluorescent bulbs hummed above him, making sleep nearly impossible. This is a documented torture technique called white torture, and it's devastatingly effective. But Vladimir noticed something strange. Every day, at exactly 3:47 a.m., he'd been counting the seconds in his head to maintain sanity. He would hear a sound. A rhythmic thumping coming from somewhere below his cell. It sounded almost like machinery. Heavy machinery operating in cycles. On day 5, his food slot opened, but instead of the usual bowl of watery soup and stale bread, a small piece of paper slid through. Vladimir grabbed it quickly before the slot slammed shut. Written in shaky handwriting were 4 words, "Don't drink the water." His heart raced. Someone was trying to communicate with him. But who? And why would he not drink the water? It was the only water source in his cell, a small tap above the metal toilet that produced a steady drip of brownish liquid. He'd been drinking it for 5 days already. That night, Vladimir forced himself to stay awake during the 3:47 a.m. thumping. He pressed his ear against the concrete floor, and that's when he heard it, not just machinery, but voices. Faint, distant voices that sounded like they were screaming. 2 weeks into his sentence, Vladimir was taken from his cell for what the guards called integration orientation. He was shackled and led through the prison complex, and for the first time, he saw other prisoners. What he saw made his blood run cold. Men shuffled through corridors like zombies, their eyes vacant, their movements mechanical. Many had visible sores on their faces and hands. Some were mumbling to themselves incoherently. These weren't just broken men. They looked chemically altered, like their brains had been rewired. Vladimir was brought to a room where a man in a white coat sat behind a desk. He introduced himself as Dr. Petrov, the facility's chief medical officer. But there was nothing medical about what happened next. Prisoner 4427, Dr. Petrov said, consulting a thick file. You've been selected for the Enhanced Compliance Program. This is a voluntary program designed to help prisoners like yourself adapt to life in IK-17. It involves a daily medication regimen that will help with adjustment. I don't consent, Vladimir said firmly. Dr. Petrov smiled, the same emotionless smile the guards wore. In IK-17, silence is consent. Refusal is also consent. Everything is consent, 4427. The only choice you have is whether you take the medication willingly or whether we administer it by force. I assure you, the second option is far less pleasant. For guards entered the room, carrying restraints. Vladimir made a decision in that moment that would save his life. He pretended to comply. He took the small white pill from Dr. Petrov's hand and placed it in his mouth, swallowing dramatically. What Dr. Petrov didn't see was Vladimir using a technique he'd learned from a former cellmate years ago, tucking the pill under his tongue, behind his back teeth. Back in his cell, Vladimir spat out the pill and examined it. It was unmarked, completely white, with a chalky texture. He wrapped it in a piece of thread from his uniform and hid it in a crack in the concrete wall. Over the next month, Vladimir played the perfect prisoner. He took the pill every day during his sessions with Dr. Petrov, and every day he hid it. He pretended to become more docile, more compliant, walking with the same shuffling gait as the other prisoners, all while staying completely lucid. And that's when he started to understand the truth about IK-17. 3 months into his sentence, Vladimir had collected 47 pills and made a crucial ally, a prisoner named Yuri, who worked in the prison's maintenance division. Yuri was different from the other prisoners. His eyes still had life in them. During a brief moment in the corridor, Yuri slipped Vladimir another note. Maintenance. Tuesday, 4 a.m. On Tuesday, at 4 a.m., Vladimir heard his cell door unlock, just a soft click. He pushed it open slowly, his heart hammering. The corridor was empty, but at the far end, he saw Yuri motioning for him to follow. They moved quickly through the prison, taking service corridors that Vladimir hadn't known existed. Finally, they reached a heavy steel door with Russian text that read, "Restricted, authorized personnel only." "What's down there?" Vladimir whispered. "The truth," Yuri replied, his voice hollow. "The reason we're all here." They descended a metal staircase that went down, down, at least 50 meters below the prison. The temperature dropped with each step, and that mechanical thumping Vladimir had heard from his cell grew louder. At the bottom was a massive underground facility, and what Vladimir saw there would explain everything. The space was the size of an aircraft hangar, filled with rows upon rows of medical equipment for stations and what looked like harvesting equipment. And in the center of it all were prisoners, dozens of them, strapped to tables, unconscious, with tubes running from their bodies to machines that hummed and whirred. "Oh my God," Vladimir breathed. "What is this?" Yuri's voice cracked as he explained. "IK-17 isn't a prison, brother. It's a farm. Those pills Dr. Petrov gives us, they're immunosuppressants and genetic markers. They're preparing us. The men down here are being harvested. Harvested for what? Organs, tissue, bone marrow, blood plasma, everything. Russia officially banned the death penalty, but they found a more profitable solution. Instead of executing prisoners, they use us as living organ banks for wealthy Russians and foreign clients willing to pay millions." Vladimir felt bile rise in his throat. "How long have you known?" "I've been here for 7 years, Yuri said. "I was one of the first prisoners sent to IK-17. I only survived because I have a rare blood type, AB negative, Rh null. They keep me alive because my blood is worth more than gold. But I've watched hundreds of men come through here. Within a year, maybe 2, they're gone, completely drained." Vladimir looked at the unconscious prisoners on the tables. Some were missing organs already. You could see the surgical scars even from a distance. Others were so pale they looked like corpses. "Those sounds I hear at 3:47 a.m. That's when they do the extractions, Yuri confirmed. The screaming you hear? Those are the prisoners who wake up during the procedures. Dr. Petrov doesn't waste anesthesia on people nobody knows are alive. Vladimir's mind raced. He thought about his lawyer, Dmitri, who had questioned the existence of IK-17. He thought about the judge's terrified expression when challenged. This wasn't just a rogue operation. This went all the way to the top. We have to expose this, Vladimir said. We have to get evidence out. Yuri laughed bitterly. Evidence? To who? The government runs this place. The guards are FSB. The doctors are military. Even if we got evidence out, who would believe it? Russia denied the existence of the gulags for decades, and those were 10 times larger than this. There has to be a way. There is, Yuri admitted. But it's suicide. Literal suicide. He led Vladimir to a small maintenance room and pulled out a hidden package wrapped in plastic. Inside was a USB drive. I've been documenting everything for 3 years, Yuri explained. Medical records, transport logs, financial transactions showing millions of dollars moving through shell corporations. Even video footage from security cameras I've managed to access. Everything proving what happens here. But the problem is getting it outside these walls. How? There's a supply truck that comes every 2 weeks. It's the only vehicle that leaves this facility and returns to civilization. The driver is a civilian contractor, not military. If we could get this drive into that truck, hidden in supplies that get returned to Moscow, it might make it out. When's the next truck? 5 days, Yuri said. But here's the thing. The only way to access the loading dock is through the medical wing. And the only prisoners allowed in the medical wing are the ones being harvested, Vladimir finished, understanding dawning on him. Exactly. One of us would have to volunteer for the program. Actually go through with it. Let them take you to the extraction rooms, hide the drive somewhere in the medical wing, and pray it gets loaded onto that truck. Vladimir was quiet for a long moment. Then he said something that would change everything. I'll do it. The next morning, Vladimir stopped hiding the pills. He started taking them for real. Within days, the effects were noticeable: drowsiness, confusion, a strange numbness that crept through his body. But he fought to stay aware, to maintain some core of consciousness, even as the drugs tried to pull him under. On day 4, Dr. Petrov noticed the change during their session. 4427, he said with genuine pleasure. You're finally accepting your situation. Excellent. I think you're ready for the next phase of your treatment. That night, guards came for Vladimir. They strapped him to a gurney and wheeled him through those same corridors Yuri had shown him, down into the underground facility. As they positioned him on one of the extraction tables, Vladimir's heart pounded so hard he thought it might burst. The USB drive was taped to his inner thigh, wrapped in waterproof material. It was a desperate gamble. Dr. Petrov appeared above him, wearing surgical scrubs and a mask. Don't worry, 4427. This will only hurt for a moment. We're starting with a kidney today. You have 2, after all. You won't miss one. Vladimir wanted to scream, to fight, but the drugs in his system made his limbs feel like lead. As Dr. Petrov prepared his instruments, Vladimir noticed something: a supply cart near the operating table, filled with medical waste bags destined for incineration. No, that wouldn't work. But then he saw it, a different cart, this one marked with tags indicating it contained reusable medical supplies that would be sterilized and restocked. That was his target. As Dr. Petrov made the first incision, Vladimir did something he trained himself for. He forced his body into a violent seizure, using every ounce of willpower to override the drugs suppressing his nervous system. His body convulsed on the table, arms and legs thrashing. Alarms blared. Nurses rushed over. Dr. Petrov shouted orders. In the chaos, Vladimir's hand, moving as if with a mind of its own, reached down, grabbed the USB drive from his thigh, and flung it toward the supply cart. It landed perfectly, sliding beneath a stack of surgical towels. Sedate him. More propofol. Dr. Petrov screamed. Vladimir felt the cold rush of drugs entering his foreline, and then everything went black. Vladimir woke up in agony. His entire left side felt like it was on fire. He was back in his cell, lying on the concrete bed platform, and when he looked down, he saw fresh surgical bandages wrapped around his torso, already stained with blood. They had taken his kidney. For 3 days, Vladimir drifted in and out of consciousness. No medical care. No painkillers. Just him, alone in his cell, with a wound that should have killed him from infection. But somehow he survived. Maybe it was spite. Maybe it was the need to know if his sacrifice had meant anything. On the 4th day, Yuri appeared at his cell door during the brief exercise period. He looked devastated. "The truck left yesterday," Yuri whispered, pretending to mop the floor outside Vladimir's cell. "I checked the medical supply manifest. The cart with the towels, it was loaded. The drive is gone. It's out." Vladimir felt tears stream down his face, the first time he'd cried since entering IK-17. "Did it work? Will anyone find it?" "I don't know, brother," Yuri said, his voice breaking. "I addressed the package to go to the Central Medical Supply Depot in Moscow. From there, it gets distributed to various hospitals. I embedded a note inside the packaging. Instructions to deliver the drive to Novaya Gazeta, the independent newspaper. But what? Even if someone finds it, even if they're brave enough to look at what's on it, the Kremlin will deny everything. They'll call it fake news, foreign propaganda, deep fakes. You know how this works." Vladimir closed his eyes. Had he mutilated himself for nothing? Given up a kidney for a gamble that would probably never pay off? What Vladimir and Yuri didn't know was that their plan worked better than they could have imagined. 3 weeks later, a medical supply worker named Anya Volkova was unpacking shipments at Moscow City Hospital No. 7 when she noticed something odd: a small USB drive wrapped in plastic, tucked between surgical towels. Attached was a handwritten note that made her blood run cold. Evidence of crimes against humanity. Deliver to Novaya Gazeta. Lives depend on this. Anya was 26 years old, a single mother trying to make ends meet. The smart thing would have been to throw the drive away and forget she ever saw it. But Anya had lost her brother to the prison system 3 years earlier. He'd been sentenced to life for a crime he didn't commit, and she'd never heard from him again. She made a copy of the drive's contents before delivering it. What she saw on those files kept her up for 3 nights straight. Medical records showing 847 prisoners processed through IK-17's organ reclamation program over 4 years. Financial records tracing $340 million in payments from Russian oligarchs and foreign nationals. Transport logs showing organs being flown to private clinics in Moscow, Dubai, and Shanghai. And worst of all, video footage. Hours and hours of security camera footage showing the extraction procedures. Men screaming as they woke up mid-surgery. Bodies being disposed of in industrial incinerators. Dr. Petrov calmly discussing profit margins with military officials. Anya delivered the original drive to Novaya Gazeta as instructed. Then she did something even braver. She uploaded the copied files to WikiLeaks, to international human rights organizations, to every major news outlet she could think of. The story broke on a Tuesday morning in October 2019. The international response was immediate and explosive. The European Union demanded immediate access to IK-17. The United Nations Human Rights Council called for emergency sessions. International human rights lawyers filed complaints at The Hague. Russia's response? Exactly what Yuri had predicted. The Kremlin issued a statement calling the evidence a sophisticated disinformation campaign orchestrated by Western intelligence agencies to undermine Russia's sovereignty. They claimed the videos were deepfakes, the documents were forgeries, and IK-17 didn't exist. But then something unexpected happened. A guard from IK-17, a man named Sergei Volkov, who had worked at the facility for 2 years, saw the news coverage and had a crisis of conscience. He contacted Novaya Gazeta through encrypted channels and confirmed everything. He provided additional evidence, his own photographs, internal communications, even GPS coordinates of the facility. Within 48 hours, satellite imagery companies were publishing photos of IK-17. There it was, exactly where Sergei said it would be, a massive concrete complex in the middle of the Siberian tundra, in a location that wasn't supposed to have any permanent structures. The Kremlin's denials became harder to maintain. Then, the families started coming forward. Hundreds of them. People whose loved ones had been sentenced to life imprisonment and then vanished. No letters. No visits allowed. No confirmation they were even alive. The families had been told their loved ones were in high-security facilities for their own protection. A mother named Svetlana Kozlova recognized her son's prisoner number, 4427, in the leaked medical records. She held a press conference in Moscow, holding up a photo of Vladimir, demanding to know if her son was still alive. International pressure became too intense to ignore. In November 2019, Russia finally admitted that a facility designated IK-17 exists, but claimed it was a standard high-security prison that had been misrepresented by foreign agents. They agreed to allow a joint inspection team, representatives from the Red Cross, Amnesty International, and UN human rights investigators, to visit the facility. Of course, by the time the inspectors arrived in December, IK-17 had been completely sanitized. The underground medical facility was emptied. Equipment was removed. The extraction rooms were demolished and filled with concrete. Prisoners who could talk were transferred to other facilities or simply disappeared. But they couldn't erase everything. Forensic teams found traces of blood in the drains, blood from hundreds of different individuals. They found surgical waste that had been incompletely destroyed. They found documentation that had been missed during the hasty cleanup, just enough to prove that something horrific had happened there. And they found prisoners, 127 of them, still alive, including Vladimir Kozlov. When the inspectors entered Vladimir's cell, they found a man who had lost 40 pounds, was missing a kidney, and had surgical scars indicating multiple procedures. But he was alive, barely conscious, severely malnourished, but alive. The inspectors also found Yuri, whose rare blood type had kept him alive longer than most. He was the one who told them everything, who showed them where the underground facility had been, who named names, who provided testimony that would eventually lead to international arrest warrants for Dr. Petrov and 14 other facility officials. Vladimir was medically evacuated to a hospital in Moscow in January 2020. His mother, Svetlana, was there when he woke up, the first time he'd seen her in nearly a year. She held his hand and wept. But freedom came with complications. Vladimir's original conviction still stood. Yes, he'd exposed a massive human rights violation, but legally, he was still a convicted triple murderer. The Russian government wasn't about to admit they'd wrongfully imprisoned him. That would open them up to even more liability. This is where Vladimir's lawyer, Dmitry Sokolov, came back into the story. Dmitry had spent the entire time Vladimir was an IK-17 investigating his case, and he'd found something incredible. The 3 men Vladimir was convicted of killing, 2 of them were still alive. They'd been in witness protection, hidden by the very police officers who had framed Vladimir. The entire case had been a setup to eliminate Vladimir, who had witnessed police corruption and was preparing to testify against several high-ranking officers. With this new evidence, international legal pressure, and the global spotlight on his case, Vladimir's conviction was overturned in March 2020. After 11 months in hell, he was finally free. But 720 other prisoners weren't so lucky. The official investigation concluded that at least 720 prisoners had died in IK-17's organ harvesting program. Their bodies were never recovered. Their families never got closure. So what happened to everyone involved in this nightmare? Dr. Petrov fled Russia before he could be arrested. He's currently believed to be living in Belarus under a false identity. Interpol has an active warrant for his arrest, but Belarus doesn't extradite to international courts. The guards and medical staff from IK-17 were offered immunity in exchange for testimony. Most took the deal and disappeared into Russia's vast bureaucracy with new identities. IK-17 itself was officially closed in February 2020. The facility was demolished in 2021. Satellite imagery now shows nothing but empty tundra where it once stood, as if it never existed. Yuri, the prisoner who helped Vladimir, was granted asylum in Germany. He lives in Berlin now, working with human rights organizations to expose prison abuses worldwide. He and Vladimir remain close friends and speak regularly. Anya Volkova, the medical supply worker who delivered the USB drive, was awarded the Anna Politkovskaya Award for Courage in Journalism and Human Rights. She used the prize money to start a foundation helping families search for missing prisoners in Russia's penal system. Vladimir Kozlov now lives in exile in France. The Russian government made it clear that despite his exoneration, he wasn't safe in Russia. Too many powerful people wanted him silenced. He works as an advocate for prisoners' rights and has testified before international tribunals about what he experienced. His mother, Svetlana, joined him in France. She says she doesn't care about being exiled from Russia. She has her son back, and that's all that matters. But here's the thing that keeps Vladimir up at night. IK-17 might be gone, but was it the only facility of its kind? In his testimony to UN investigators, Yuri mentioned something chilling. During his 7 years at IK-17, he occasionally saw prisoners being transferred out, not to other prisons, but to what guards called sister facilities. He overheard references to IK-23 and IK-31, facilities that don't appear in any official registry. To this day, families of missing prisoners report the same patterns. Loved ones sentenced to life imprisonment, transferred to unknown locations, all contact severed. No confirmation of life or death. Russia has over 600,000 people in its prison system. How many of them are in facilities that don't officially exist? How many are being used as involuntary organ donors for the wealthy and connected? Vladimir believes IK-17 wasn't shut down because of morality or justice. It was shut down because it got exposed. He believes the operation simply moved elsewhere, became more careful, more hidden. And here's the truly terrifying part. This isn't just a Russian problem. International investigators found evidence that organs harvested from IK-17 were sold to clients in at least 15 countries, including Western nations. People with money and connections who needed transplants and didn't want to wait on legitimate organ donor lists. Someone somewhere is living with Vladimir's kidney right now. Someone paid hundreds of thousands of dollars for it, and they probably have no idea where it really came from. Vladimir wants the world to know this. The men who died in IK-17 weren't just numbers or statistics. They were sons, brothers, fathers. Many were innocent, like me. Many were victims of a corrupt system. All of them deserved better than to be harvested like livestock and erased from existence. Their names should be remembered. Their deaths should matter. And the system that allowed this to happen should be held accountable. As of today, not a single high-ranking Russian official has been prosecuted for the IK-17 atrocities. The Kremlin maintains its position that the facility was improperly managed, but denies any systemic organ harvesting program. The 720 confirmed victims have still not been officially acknowledged by the Russian government. Their families are still waiting for answers. If this story shocked you, if it made you angry, if it made you want to do something, good. That's exactly how you should feel. Share this video. Spread this story. Don't let the world forget what happened in that frozen wasteland in Siberia. Don't let those 720 victims be forgotten. And if you want to help, I've put links in the description to organizations working to expose prison abuses and support families of missing prisoners. Even a small donation can make a difference. Hit that like button if you think this story needed to be told. Subscribe because we're not done exposing the darkest corners of the prison system. And drop a comment telling me, what other prison secrets should we investigate next? This has been the story of Russia's death row, the prison that wasn't supposed to exist, and the men who exposed it at the cost of everything. Thank you for watching. And remember, the truth always finds a way out.